All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hello, hello. It is the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Kim McAllister filling in for Mark Thompson, but I managed to convince Mark Thompson to come on the show. Albert, hi.
Good morning, Kim. Yes.
Good morning to you.
And our special guest is actually here in the green room.
Let's bring him in and find out what's going on with Mark Thompson. Hi, you.
Hello, Kim. Hello, Albert. Hello, everybody. Hi. Oh, my goodness. Greetings from the nation's capital, everyone. This is where it all happens. I'm just miles from some of the most corrupt politicians this country has ever known. Not to mention the corrupt lobbyists and the military-industrial complex. It's all just within a short drive from here.
Are you outside your parents' house, or where are you standing?
I am right outside my parents' house. It's a place of holiness. I can
look at I'm looking at the fall colors. It's beautiful.
Oh, I mean, my parents have a beautiful backyard. My dad talks about it all the time and loves it. He sits in a chair and looks out on the beautiful. Washington is gorgeous this time of year, so it's really a pleasure to be here. But I know you've got a very big show ahead, and I'm traveling right now, so I will actually. I have to
check
be quiet here for the end of this little run. Yeah. Anyway, so I will be traveling today. Back on the show tomorrow. You had a great couple of shows. I loved the stuff yesterday. I loved Tory Ryder and the conversations that you had yesterday were really, really good. So I know you have a Pulitzer Prize winner coming up, Michael Hiltzik.
I don't know, not just one Pulitzer, he's got two.
I didn't know that.
He's a double Pulitzer winner. Well, he's got some other awards too. I mean, the guy is award heavy. Yeah.
The one thing I'll say about Hiltzik is we did graduate from the same university, so I am Pulitzer adjacent.
Okay, I'll give you that.
There might be a Pulitzer inside me if I have a late inning rally. Great fun, though, to see you, Kim. Thank you again for kind of keeping the home fires burning.
Of course. And you're going to be back with us tomorrow. So safe travels. And it's so good to see your face. And glad everything's going well.
Can you smell the shame from my childhood from where you are?
If I try really hard, I think I can.
Yeah, which one is Mark Thompson?
Yeah. All the shame, the apologies, all the horror of my adolescence is all right here in this home.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, you had mentioned the election advertisements back east and that they were just brutal. Can you kind of fill us in on what you've been seeing election related?
It wasn't just back east. I mean, it was my point in my poor Kim has to get me these. I'm sending her all this stuff because I'm still in the country. She's looking forward to December when I actually leave the country and I won't be able to do this. But I sent her a note saying, I'm in Washington. You have to understand Washington is right across the bridge from, Virginia. Everybody understands that. But what I mean is from a media market standpoint, we see in Washington all of the stuff that is designed to hit Virginia voters. Mm-hmm. And as you know, Virginia has just registered an extremely important election. You'll talk more about it in this time you'll spend with Rothmann, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But and the Democrats really clap back, which is just beautiful. But what I was saying to you was, what I'm saying to everybody else is, the nature of the ads was so arch, so nasty, so negative. I mean, beyond anything I've seen in my life.
Never seen anything like this?
I've never seen anything like it. Thank you.
No.
And
you're welcome.
Apparently,
there's never been anything like this.
apparently that's the new America. The nastier, the better.
Yeah.
But literally, they looked like parody ads. They were that nasty. But ads, or I would suggest just the issue of women's reproductive rights and the looming issue that may affect the general election in 2024. You saw it play out in Virginia. And Virginia, as I say, is just a short distance from where I am right now. So, a consequential election, mostly for the way it points up the complete misguided nature or reading of the poll tea leaves, and we can talk more about that in the days ahead. But Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend. Safe travels. Be well, and thanks for popping in.
Love seeing you. Bye. Bye.
Mark Thompson, everybody. We'll see more of him tomorrow. Before I get to Michael Hiltzik, please click the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do that as well. And of course,
with your iron rod.
Smash it with your iron rod, indeed. And you can always check us out at themarkthompsonshow.com. You'll find all kinds of ways to participate and help the show at that site, themarkthompsonshow.com. Okay. Big election yesterday in Ohio. We heard about that, and we will talk with John Rothmann coming up at 11:30. But first, I really want to talk to our double Pulitzer Prize winning Los Angeles Times columnist. He has written stories in recent days about the complexity of corporations taking a stand on the war between Israel and Hamas, the Google antitrust trial not being more open to the public. He's talked about Speaker Johnson wanting to cut the IRS budget in order to give that money to Israel. Bidenomics has been one of his topics. I was reading all of his articles last night, but he also wrote an article recently on the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried. Let's bring on Michael Hiltzik, everybody. Yay, here he is. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for agreeing to...
Well, thanks for having me on. I just want to tell you, I only have one Pulitzer.
Are you sure? Because
What?
I've read that you had two. The internet doesn't lie, Michael Hiltzik.
I would know. I've been nominated, you know.
Oh, you've been
maybe
nominated
8
for
or
more
10
than
times,
one.
but I've only won once. Now, that being said, I've written not just
My bad.
one
I'm sorry.
column about the Sam Bankman-Fried trial, but two. The second one ran this morning.
Oh, okay.
So, it's fresh.
Oh, it's a freshie. Good. Well, let's talk about the one that you wrote 4 days ago. That one I thought had some really interesting questions about whether you think this is kind of a verdict for the whole crypto industry or whether it's specific fraud in this case. Can you talk a little bit more about, whether this is just your run-of-the-mill fraud that can happen in any industry or whether this is more kind of systemic within the crypto industry as a whole?
Sure. So I think it's one can say that a fraud is particularized or individual when it happens in the context of a regulated, legitimate industry. So when Bernie Madoff, ripped off, so many people for billions of dollars, you could say, well, that's Madoff. He was a crook. But it doesn't really mean that the whole stock and bond market is crooked. We know that's regulated. We know that there's reasonable safety and protections for investors in that market. So we can look at Madoff as sort of a peculiar case. That's not true in crypto, and the reason is that crypto generally, as I put it, through and through, is a scam.
Yeah.
There's nothing legitimate about it. There's no regulation that's worth anything involved. So what Sam Bankman-Fried's case tells us is that the whole system is crooked and foul. He didn't do anything in there that basically, many other participants in that market are doing. There are more criminal cases already on the docket involving other so-called crypto exchanges and crypto deals. We're going to see a lot of that because basically, fundamentally, with crypto, there's no there.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what your article today is about, is kind of talking about what Silicon Valley venture capitalists are looking at, what they wanted to believe all along and really sunk their money into all along, and how maybe, I don't know, are they not ready to let go of the lie or not ready to say we were wrong?
Well, I think they're embarrassed, number one. Look, the firm that I sort of focus my column today on is Sequoia Capital, which is the second largest venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. It's one of the oldest, maybe the oldest, or the second oldest. It dates back to the 50s and 60s. It really has been a leader in venture investing for decades and decades. And they plunged into Sam Bankman-Fried's firm, which is FTX. In 2022, they put first $150 million into the firm. Then they invested another $23 million in a fund he was starting. And this is all done with barely any. I mean, they say there was a rigorous due diligence process, which is what investors, want to do when they're looking at a company to invest in. They really, they subject that company to, basically a magnifying glass. They said they did that, but it's fairly clear that they did not, because the questions that due diligence would fundamentally ask were not asked, or they would have known that this was FTX was just a hive of red flags. But what they were sold was the idea that FTX was going to make gobs of money, and implicitly they were going to do it by ripping off clients and investors. And that's fundamental to the whole crypto marketplace, is because there's no true value in crypto tokens, Bitcoin and everything else, it's wide open for basically predatory behavior. So here's Sequoia, which claims to be, and I think legitimately has been treated as some of the most sophisticated investors in the entire nation, if not world. And they're saying, well, gee, we were lied to by Sam Bankman-Fried, and that's what happened. He deliberately lied to us. And, my point today is that he couldn't have lied to Sequoia if Sequoia wasn't willing to accept the lies at face value and didn't do the job of investigating the company they were putting all this money into.
But why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't sophisticated investors who, likely in their life as investors have seen things go belly up before, have seen bad investments roll through the door, why wouldn't they have been more savvy?
Well, there are a couple of factors there. One is that they were seduced by the prospect of making huge profits, essentially, whether they really had internalized the idea that this was going to be done by predatory behavior by FTX or not. They certainly bought into the idea that this was the coming thing and that there was a lot of money to be made, no matter how it was going to be made. The other factor is that the general behavior of venture funds is that you invest in 100 companies and maybe one or two pay off. You take losses on the other, 98 or 99, but the one that hits so well that it covers everything. And Sequoia has invested, at the ground floor in Google and Airbnb and all sorts of other companies that really have been major successes. So they looked at it and they said, well, we're not putting that much into FTX as a percentage of all the money we have, so we'll take a plunge on it. We'll take a flyer, and we'll see what happens. Now, the fact that it blew up so spectacularly that it became an embarrassment to Sequoia is sort of the downside of that devil may care, devil take the hindmost approach to investing.
The penalty phase for Sam Bankman-Fried gets underway in March. I read you said he could get, after being found guilty of 7 counts of fraud, up to 110 years. I also read somewhere else 115. It's maybe they're rounding up and you're rounding down, but it's a long time, like more than 100 years in prison. Does that seem excessive? Is that a sentence that you expect in this case? And will a judge use it to send a message to people in Silicon Valley, like, you can't invent these schemes and get away with it?
Yeah, the 110 years or the 115 years, whatever it actually works out to be, that's the maximum sentence for, when you combine and add up each of these crimes. It's what's in the law. Now, typically, we don't see the maximum sentence being imposed by a judge, and there's a whole system of pluses and minuses, or there's a system of minuses from the maximum that's in play in the federal judicial system. You get credit for certain things. You get credit for showing remorse. You get credit for committing to compensate your victims. You get credit for, there's a certain extent to which the ultimate sentence is keyed to how much you've stolen. And now in this case, there's as much as $10 billion was stolen. So that's not going to work in Bankman-Fried's favor.
No.
And 110, 115 years, he's not going to live another 110 or 115 years. So anything over his lifespan would be, in the nature of a message. But, it's certainly likely, or at least, the smart money says he's going to be sentenced to, several decades in federal prison.
We got a question from Edward. Thank you for the contribution, Edward. Says, to hedge against the dollar, would you invest in gold and silver or Bitcoin? Do you acknowledge that Bitcoin has some fundamental benefits?
Well, I'll answer the second question first, and the answer is no. Bitcoin has not been shown to have any fundamental benefits at all. There was a period in which it was seen as a way to basically to commit crimes for money, ransomware. Somebody would basically hold, a company's or an institution's computer data hostage and say, we'll free it up if you just send us X in Bitcoin. And that was based on the notion that Bitcoin was anonymous and couldn't be traced. We know it can be traced, so that's sort of faded. Nobody has really produced a use argument for Bitcoin or any of the other cryptocurrencies. No one has pointed to anything that suggests this is good for anything, and certainly not that it's better than than legitimate currencies for anything. All of the virtues that it supposedly has are not really virtues, but in our financial system, they are drawbacks. People say, well, if you pay for something in Bitcoin, you can't reverse that transaction, and that's good. Nobody can take the money back. But of course, for the average consumer or investor, you want to be able to unwind a transaction if it turns out that you haven't received the merchandise you paid for or the service, or you've been ripped off or what have you. So, its inviolability is not a virtue. And in terms of hedging against the dollar, I can't really give financial advice, but gold or silver, they have established values. You can look up the value of gold or silver, instantaneously. The spot market is always there. Hedging against the dollar, I'm not sure that in recent years gold or silver or any precious metals have actually worked to hedge against real currencies. It just hasn't worked out. So, but there's nothing to Bitcoin. So basically, you're not hedging against anything. You're just basically buying something that's got a stated value and hoping you can sell it to somebody else before that value drops. And this is what we call the greater fool theory. You own something and you try to basically fob it off on a bigger fool than you are.
Yeah. Do you think this guilty verdict on 7 counts for Sam Bankman-Fried is just that, or does it send a message to the crypto industry that that industry is dead if it wasn't already?
Well, I think that, you can't persuade the crypto industry or crypto fans or fanatics that what they are doing is worthless. I mean, that's basically not the pitch that they accept. What one would hope is that this is a message to legislators and regulators that they are trying to push something that isn't fit for human consumption. Mm-hmm. We have legislators in Congress who've been pushing crypto for a while. They should be ashamed of themselves. Yeah. We have regulators who've been trying to basically, step on the face of crypto for a while, and they should be encouraged. But the only real worthwhile regulation is to wipe it out. Sam Bankman-Fried, when he was riding high, one of his things was he was promoting a regulatory scheme for crypto that really amounted to no regulation at all. It had the veneer.
Of
It had the
course.
veneer of regulation, but it was all based on the idea that crypto is something special and it doesn't fit well with the existing regulatory system. Even commodities executives, who are in the same sort of field, were saying, we're not in favor of that. We like regulation. If you take regulation off, people are going to be ripped off. So,
You
and
wrote
now, of
in
course, whatever scheme Sam Bankman-Fried was pushing in Washington in mid 2020, that's dead now
yeah, it's
because
gone.
he's got obviously no credibility.
You wrote at the end of one of your articles, and I wasn't sure if you were being facetious or serious. Keep your eyes, you say, as I write this, the next scams are bulking large on the horizon. Keep your eyes on artificial intelligence and self-driving cars. Do you think we're going to see some scams going on with this emerging technology as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anytime you have something out there that is hard to explain to the layperson, it's going to be over promoted, and it's going to be basically over described or over determined. And I think AI, there's an enormous amount of hype in the AI space already, and we see that just absolutely everywhere. Not only now, but ever since the birth of AI in the 1950s, there have been waves of promotion of AI that have all basically come apart. And I haven't seen much this time around that says that this time is different. Self-driving cars, look, Cruise, up your way,
Yeah.
managed to persuade the Public Utilities Commission of the state of California that it was great, that robo-taxis were here and safe. And we know now that that's just, obviously untrue. And in fact, Cruise, the PUC, or rather the DMV of California, has suggested that maybe they were misled by Cruise in connection with at least one of the accidents
That
that's
happened in
gotten
San
so much
Francisco.
publicity.
That's right.
Waymo, which is another self-driving vehicle company, has just come out with a paper that says, we've proven that Waymo cars are much, much, much safer than cars driven by human beings. I've taken a close look at that paper, and I'm going to be writing about it maybe this week. And I'm not sure that it proves its case.
Yeah.
Maybe Waymo cars are safer than Cruise, but the case is, as far as I'm concerned, the case has not been made that they're safer, universally and invariably safer than human. So we're going to see that. And the main point that I was making is that the siren song of great profits in something new is always there in high tech, and it's always there in the investment community. And when one thing falls apart, there's typically something else waiting in the wings. I don't know if it's going to be AI, self-driving cars, but it's going to be something. Because the goal of getting in on the ground floor of something that may be a big thing is just too powerful.
You mentioned self-driving cars, and so I'll tell you the new word out this morning on Cruise is that they're recalling about 1,000 driverless cars after that crash in San Francisco you mentioned. But it's not just in San Francisco. They're pulling them from all the cities where they are involved in testing. They say that the direction subsystem of the automated driving software could respond improperly after a crash, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And so not only are they stopped in California now, but all the other states that they're involved in testing.
I think the shame here, or maybe to go stronger and say the crime here, is that they've been testing these vehicles on public roads where they're mixing with innocent motorists. And if
Yeah.
you don't actually, if you're not 100% or 1,000% sure that they're
Yeah.
going to always work correctly, you have no business putting them on the road
Right.
with people who don't know what's going on. And for regulators to have allowed this at this stage is just outrageous.
You also wrote an article about Bidenomics, and it's a question I've been fascinated by as I'm paying more for everything at the grocery store. Yet, under the Biden administration, the economic outlook is actually better. Maybe not for people like me who are looking at their grocery store bill going, what is happening? But one of the questions you ask is, why isn't President Joe Biden getting more credit for the current economy?
Yeah, let's if you look at the economic indicators that we have at hand, the U.S. economy is very strong, and it's actually even stronger for middle and lower income Americans than for wealthier Americans. Unemployment has been below 4% for months and months and months. Inflation has come down sharply. There's a lot to like about Bidenomics, if we want to call it that.
Yeah.
Now, what you're looking at and what a lot of people are looking at, and believe me, I got a lot of pushback on that column from people who say, well, how come I'm paying more for gasoline, eggs, everything than I used to? And the reason is that inflation happened. And the fact that, we now have inflation that by some measures is down to, 2, maybe 3% a year, which is sort of traditional, when it spiked at 9.1% last year, or excuse me, in June. Well, that drove prices up. And it's not really likely that we're going to see prices of commodities like food come back down to any great extent, although we are seeing gasoline come way down from where it peaked. So, but gasoline prices, the inflation in gasoline is based on the price of crude oil, and that fluctuates and it's coming down. The price of food is sort of there and established. So what you want to see is for wages actually gain on existing prices. And we are seeing that. In fact, wage rates, especially for middle and working class people, have been coming in at better than inflation for several months. So that's what's going to actually bring the recovery. But if people expect that, now that inflation is back down to a reasonable level, we're going to see prices that we saw in 2020 or 2021 or even early 22, that's not going to happen. And people, sadly enough, we're going to have to get used to paying more for certain things, but they're paying less for used cars and trucks. They're paying less for energy. They're paying less for electronic devices, TVs. And
unless you're a PG&E customer, our rates keep going up and up and up here. So,
PG is your cross to bear in Northern California.
I guess the question is, how does the Biden administration, or how do the Democrats convince voters that the economy is doing better when it doesn't feel so much better in other regards?
Yeah, I think there's some evidence that this polls or the sense that people who are unhappy with the economy may be overstated, and then you move into this idea that, Biden is unpopular because of the economy. And, my take on that is that, and that's going to be trouble for him in the presidential election next year. And my take on that is, look, the presidential election next year is not going to be a referendum on, do you like Joe Biden or do you not like Joe Biden? A presidential election is two candidates, occasionally three, but mostly two candidates who are running against each other and making the case against each other. And if that, as it seems to be likely, is going to be Biden versus Trump, then what makes anybody think that Trump would do better as a steward of the economy than Biden has been? I mean, let's not forget that inflation bottomed out and gas prices bottomed out in April of 2020 when Trump was president, and they started rising inexorably from there when Trump was president. So, whatever trends you want to point to started over him.
Right.
The unemployment rate was higher, all these things. And, if Trump can make the case, legitimately that he'd be better at running the economy than Biden, let's hear him do that. But
Right.
he's not even bothering to do that right now. Every presentation he makes, every speech, every rally is basically, I won the last election and, it was stolen. He doesn't even try to discuss economic policy, but he's going to have to when he runs.
And I think a lot of people are paying attention to the economy. It's going to be a massive issue for a lot of people. So he better come up with something to say, or maybe he doesn't have to. Maybe he just points to Joe Biden and says, "Look at your bills now." That's all he has to say.
Yeah, well, maybe that'll be enough, but I doubt it. And I think, by the way, that the results of the election yesterday
Right.
basically tell a story about Trump, and that is that the American public, in general terms, hates Trump. Every candidate that he's endorsed, going back to 2021, has lost. The culture war that he's running on has been basically repudiated by voters, even in the reddest of red states.
Mm-hmm.
As the campaign progresses and he's got to spend more time out in public, people are going to be repelled,
Yeah.
I think, even more than they are. But there's no evidence that the general public really likes Trump. There's no evidence that there's a Trump bloc that can win him the election. That's sort of fantasy.
Last question. Can we talk about Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and his plan to cut the IRS budget by, what is it, $14.3 billion? So that will be the money that we can then vote to give to Israel. Does this make sense to you? What are there holes in this theory?
Well, it makes sense as a expression of Republican, traditional Republican mores. I mean, the Republicans have been fighting the increase in IRS budget that was put in place last year under the Inflation Recovery Act of $80 billion, I think, over 10 years. They've been fighting that from the start. And the reason is because they know that money is going to be used in enforcement. And the people who are going to be enforced are the tax cheats. And most of them, or most tax cheating, goes on among the 1%. And we've got
no.
And I've written columns sort of laying out in chapter and verse how we know this.
Yeah.
So when Johnson says, we're going to take the money out of the IRS budget, we all know what's going on here. He wants to basically play to his patrons, or the Republican patrons, who are rich Americans and corporations. And by the way, we know, number one, that this proposal of his is going to be dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate, and number two, just more generally, this guy is one weird guy, and the worst thing that probably ever happened to him is becoming speaker, because no one even knew who the hell he was before that, and now they do, and they're looking at everything from his personal finances to his family life to this weird story of his supposedly adopting a black youth when he was not even married yet. It's just, this guy is basically not passing the smell test, and the stench is only going to get worse. And also, of course, he's got a job to do, which is, to avoid a government shutdown in a week or two. And he doesn't look to have made any progress on that or devoted any attention to that whatsoever. So he's a bust.
Yeah. Last question, and then I'll let you get back to your busy day at the LA Times. The Google antitrust trial. And you're saying this is something that should be open to the public. They're being very behind closed doors secretive about what's going on here. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, Google claims, and not only Google, but some of its business partners who are enmeshed in this case, so they're not defendants. That includes Apple.
Hmm.
Google claims that if everything that's been presented in court or filed in court was open and unredacted, then a lot of its business secrets, its proprietary secrets, would be exposed to public view, and that's unfair. And unfortunately for all of us, they've got a judge in that case who's bought that argument far more than he should. When we get versions of papers and documents that have been filed in court, they have these big black bars
Redacted,
across them because they're redacted, and some of them aren't allowed in open court at all. And to me, this is just another manifestation of the idea that there are two judicial systems in this country. There's one for the rich and the well-connected and corporations, and there's one for everybody else, and that includes us. And Google is just playing the game of the first and getting, a lot, if not most, of what it wants, and the rest of us are on the outside looking in, and that's wrong.
Michael Hiltzik, I think you should have 1,000,000 Pulitzer Prizes, like all over the office. Just give them all to Michael Hiltzik. Thank you for always being willing to pop onto the Mark Thompson Show and share your knowledge with us. And thanks for coming on today.
All right, Kim. Thanks for having me.
See you next time. Bye, Michael Hiltzik.
See you next time.
Yay. Michael Hiltzik, everybody, from the LA Times. I was going to do news, but I think now I just got to...
The Mark Thompson Show.
Jump right into my friend, John Rothmann, my John Rothmann, not your John Rothmann. Everybody's John Rothmann. Here he is, John Rothmann, everybody. Yay.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, how's it going over there?
Well, it's an interesting week politically, that's for darn sure, not to mention international relations. And I'm glad to see you are keeping the show going.
Yeah, we got to keep the Mark Thompson Show rolling. He'll be back tomorrow, but I'm keeping the seat warm. So I thought about you last night when the voters of Ohio decided to go ahead and write in to their state constitution that abortion is a legal choice for women in that state. And I was overjoyed to see that women came out to vote of all parties.
And men.
And it's overwhelmingly supported. And it's something we've seen before where, the government's trying to take our rights away and we have to stand up and say, not so fast, pal. What's your take on this?
Well, it was a tremendous show. I wasn't surprised. The Republican Party took a big hit last night. In Ohio, they put a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy into trying to defeat a woman's right to choose. By the way, I don't say it's a defense of abortion. It is a woman's right to choose, which was on the line. And I would tell the Republicans, just take a look at the results. And the same thing happened in Virginia with Governor Youngkin, who campaigned vigorously in order to try to get both houses of the Virginia legislature to go Republican. And they didn't. They went Democratic.
Yeah.
I would say the Republicans have a real problem with issues. And I'm delighted and I'm not surprised. And because we've talked about this so often, you know that I've predicted this for a long time.
You always predict, you've always predicted it. But Ohio voters support the writing of the abortion into their state constitution. Does it mean that we're just as a nation more pro-choice, or does it mean somehow that this is bad for Trump and in the 2024 election, this is a sign that the Democrats are going to come back in and be successful again?
No, this is a reaction by people of conscience, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. To take a woman's right to choose is unconscionable. Mm-hmm. And the Republicans rejoiced a year ago when Roe was overthrown and the Dobbs decision came down. And I said at the time, both on KGO and here with you and Mark, that this was a disaster for the Republican Party. Women and men understand what it means to take away a woman's right to choose, and what it does to families and what it does to generations. I mean, this is their position of being so-called pro-life is ridiculous. And I have to say it very clearly so there's no ambiguity. If you choose not to go through the medical procedure of an abortion, that's your choice.
Right.
But the minute the government imposes a restriction, I listened to Chris Christie very uncomfortably. He kept saying, well, let's turn it back to the states. Let's turn it back to the states. And I thought to myself, Chris, if this had been the 1950s and we wanted to turn segregation back to the states, half the states of the union might still be segregated. I mean, it is unconscionable for the Republican Party, theoretically now saying, turn it back to the states. That is not Abraham Lincoln's position. Lincoln, the founder of the Republican Party, certainly its first Republican president, pointed out that a house divided against itself cannot stand. We have to oppose this effort on a state-by-state basis to take away a woman's right to choose, just as we would have opposed, and I vigorously opposed, the idea that segregation should be a decision made by a state.
Our mothers and grandmothers already fought for this right. And now, here we are again. And some of the campaign signs for this Ohio abortion issue were great. One sign says, I will not go quietly back to the 1950s. Another one says, the post-Roe generation votes. And it's that t-shirt slogan that kind of hit me. The post-Roe generation votes. Should that mean that Republicans should be scared? Because a post-Roe generation voting could mean a bunch of people that might not have cared to vote before now finally realize politics affects them in a way that they never saw coming.
You are correct, 100%. That's what's motivating women and men to get out and vote.
Yeah.
The Republican Party has deserted the very principle which they so-called advocate, the right of individuals to make their own choices.
Yeah. When the abortion issue passed last night, that was one thing. But then the Virginia state legislature was swept by the Democrats. And in a very red state like Kentucky as well, we had the governor, Beshear, reelected. Does that send a message that 2024 is going to go blue?
I don't know whether it's going to go blue or red. What I know is that there is a serious question that must be addressed by the Republican Party. If they stick with Donald Trump and the so-called Trump approach, they're going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
at least that's what I think.
Yeah. Let's switch over today, unless you have anything else to say about the election.
No, that's it. Fine.
Okay. We'll switch over to the Trump trial, because today Ivanka is taking the stand. A couple of days ago, Trump imploded on the stand, came out belligerently, with words, swiping at the judge. It was an S show, basically. The judge at one point telling Trump's attorneys, rein this guy in. Oh, Gesundheit.
Yep, sorry.
What are your thoughts about the Trump trial and what's going on here?
Look, the judge has already made the decision. Donald Trump overestimated the value of his properties.
Right.
His empire is going to crumble. He can appeal all he wants. The question now is whether the Republican Party, that is, Republican voters, will wake up and understand that Donald Trump is a liability. That's the question. And we're going to have to wait and see. But, more interesting to me was this poll.
Yeah.
Trump is leading Biden in swing states, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan,
that's
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin.
to me.
I don't think it's true. I think they're wrong.
Well, before you get into it, and because that was my next question for you, I wanted to read you something Dan Rather wrote today.
Sure.
So take a sip of water while I go into this, because it's about a paragraph. Dan Rather writes, "This week, once again, taught us an important lesson to anyone who would listen. There are two kinds of polls. he writes. There are the polls sponsored by media outlets and universities that come with margins of error, cross tables, and deep debates over methodology. These are the ones that dominate the talking head panels on cable news and Democratic doom scrolling. Then, he writes, there are the polls where voters actually cast ballots and elect representatives or pass ballot measures. Guess which one counts a heck of a lot more? And the first kind of poll, particularly a recent one by the New York Times that showed President Biden trailing Trump in key battleground states, the Democrats and their incumbent party leader are in a world of hurt. But the second kind of poll, the ones which the voters traipse on election day or vote absentee, have tended to paint a different picture, starting with the midterms in 2022 through a slew of special elections, and now with votes in multiple states last night, the Democrats are outperforming expectations, at least the ones set from the first kinds of polls. And that's election after election of actual data.
Dan Rather is correct. Now, I'm going to be watching tonight the next Fox cattle show. I won't call it a debate.
Yeah.
But you're going to have Republican candidates. Well, first question out of my mouth would be, what did you learn from the election?
Right.
All of the candidates on that stage oppose a woman's right to choose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they should pay the consequences. And all of them need to answer the direct question about Donald Trump. What do we do about Donald Trump? How do we deal with it?
Yeah.
And none of those candidates is prepared to do that. And I think that, Kim, represents a tremendous problem. But Dan Rather is right. Every time the populace, people, go to the polls, even in Republican states, the Trump anti-abortion forces, all these people lose.
Yeah.
So I frankly expect the Democrats are going to sweep in the next election. Look, we haven't even talked about the Speaker of the House.
That's kind of what I was hoping you would say, though.
Yes.
I just wanted to. When you say the Democrats are going to sweep in the next election, it kind of, I want to let it rain over me for just a moment, because those are the words I've been wanting to hear from you.
Well, it's not a partisan judgment.
Yeah.
Look what happened in Ohio. Yeah. But look at this new Speaker of the House of Representatives, who we have spoken about. Who's to the right of Attila the Hun.
Yeah.
I mean, there is not a chance that the American people are going to embrace that. Now, somebody out there is going to say to me, but John, Trump has an iron lock. Well, let me tell you, 40% of the people probably will vote for the Republican Party. They'll probably vote for these Republican candidates. Mm-hmm. But I just don't see it. Now, let me say a quick word about Joe Biden, who is the leader of the Democratic Party and the president of the United States, and who is determined to run for another term. I don't know in the end whether he will be able to be very honest with you. I just don't know. But I can tell you that the speculation is already growing in the Democratic Party. Do they go with Kamala Harris? Do they go with Gavin Newsom? Do they go with Amy Klobuchar? Are there other potential candidates who exist? And the answer is there have to be. There will be. And of course, the presidency is bigger than any one person. Joe Biden, in the end, will have to make the decision about what to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know how he will make that decision. Remember, and I point this out respectfully, that in the 1960s, we had world leaders who were all in their 70s and 80s, from Konrad Adenauer in Germany to David Ben-Gurion in Israel. These were people who had been around for many, many years. But it's hard to give up power. You know what they say, Kim? Power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. And so
I think people forget when they talk about President Biden's age that former President Trump is only 3 years younger. You know, he's not that much. They're both old. They're both old guys. So I don't know why age is important for one and not important for the other. And if I'm looking at both of them and trying to judge which one is healthier, the healthier nearly 80-year-old person, I'm thinking Biden looks a lot healthier. I'm just saying.
Well, the question is whether or not we want to go with either one. Look, Biden's age is a factor. You don't normally think that a person 80 years old plus should be president. Donald Trump brings a whole other thing. He looks more vigorous. But let me tell you something. If you listen to Donald Trump carefully, His mind is certainly not clear.
Yeah.
So this is a question. That's why a majority of people in the United States would prefer to see other candidates besides Biden and Trump. But I think the Democratic Party will renominate Biden if he wants it. There's nothing to stop him.
You mentioned the House of Representatives, and I'm looking at a story that the Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee is now issuing subpoenas for members of the Biden family. This is Kentucky Congressman James Comer announcing President Biden's son Hunter and brother James Biden have been subpoenaed to appear for depositions. This because of an escalation in House Republicans' impeachment inquiries into President Biden. A subpoena was also issued for former Hunter Biden business associate Rob Walker. And again, this is all about the Biden family business dealings, which have gone nowhere and done nothing. But they keep doing this. And now subpoenas coming.
I'm not surprised. Jim Comer said he was going to do this. Yeah. I'm surprised they've waited this long. Maybe they're just waiting to get closer to the election. But the simple truth is, if Joe Biden did something wrong, come in with the evidence. They haven't. Remember, Kim, when they held the hearing and they said, this is it. The blockbuster is coming. Do you remember that? And you know what came? Nothing. So all I can say...
Every time they say a blockbuster is coming, every time they say, 2 days from now, we're going to make a big announcement. And the same thing with Trump. Every time he, told the world, I've got information for you, it turned out to be a big fat goose egg.
I think that's one of the reasons the Democrats are going to take the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
I think people understand that the Republicans are full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. But let me make it clear so everyone understands this. If there is something that connects Joe Biden, not his family, but Joe Biden, to some sort of corruption, the American people have a right to know, and the Republicans have the obligation to produce the evidence. If they can't, then it's not an issue. But I'm not voting for Hunter Biden for president.
No.
Nor, by the way, am I voting for Donald Trump's children for president. Right. Thank God, if you are responsible for all the actions of your children, just think how often you and I would have been in the principal's office.
Well, but here's the difference as well. President Biden didn't invite Hunter Biden into the White House to be his chief advisor, whereas Trump's kids were all circling in the White House doing their White House-y jobs. There's a big difference.
Don't confuse the Republicans with the facts. That's my advice. Because they have it in their heads, some of them, that Joe Biden's family is a crime family. Oh, may I commend to all of you, just listen to Fox. Listen to the people on Fox. I won't call it news. It's not news. It's an oxymoron to call it Fox News. But they are making a case. It's very different, may I be so bold as to say, as the case of Richard Nixon or the case of Bill Clinton, where there was substantive, sound information which led us to certain conclusions. Yeah. But what the Republicans are doing now is absolutely ridiculous, and I think most people understand that.
We were talking about the president's children and the former president's children, and back to the Trump trial. Ivanka is on the stand, and a story just came out because there's no cameras in the courtroom about what is being said on the stand. New York Attorney General Letitia James says Ivanka benefited personally from her inflated numbers at her dad's business, but Ivanka said she had no role in preparing her father's financial statements, and those were things that she wasn't even privy to any of that information. Once again, distancing themselves, as the other Trump kids have done, from anything about the business. But we know that she worked there and she knew things and she was there in the day-to-day business operations. They don't, everyone is kind of backpedaling like, had nothing to do with that. But they all had their fingers in the pie. She didn't
prepare the returns. Weisselberg or one of the people did. Yeah. But, it's interesting. Somebody asked me a question the other day about whether or not, because I don't prepare my own taxes. I have an accountant who prepares the taxes. And I may review them, and it's not that my taxes are all that complicated. But if there's an error, I didn't stipulate the error. The question is here, did the Trump children and the Trump family want these overestimations to be part of the record? Look, I don't begrudge the Trump children whatever comeuppance, including the deals in China, which has netted them a fortune, an absolute fortune. And I don't blame Joe Biden for Hunter Biden exploiting the fact that his father was vice president and president. I don't think you can blame parents necessarily for the conduct of their children. What I resent, what I think is wrong, is the idea of trying to hang Joe Biden because he has a son named Hunter who did something wrong. And I come back to that because the Republicans really thought, at least I believe they did, they thought they were really going to go to town with this. And it hasn't. It's flopped. It was not an issue in the election that just took place. It's not going to be an issue unless they really find a smoking gun. And I if they haven't found it yet, I don't think they will. But you know what I'm really waiting for, Kim? I'm waiting for Smith, the trial, to begin in Washington. Why? Because they're going to call Mark Meadows, who was the president's chief of staff. And if Mark Meadows tells the truth, Donald Trump is in big trouble. And they're going to call Mike Pence, who now, because he's no longer a candidate for president, no longer has to worry about saying something that will antagonize Trump voters.
Yeah, but the problem is the Trump team is doing its whole old song and dance with delay, delay, delay. And so are all these people that got a slap on the wrist because they're flipping on Trump in both the Georgia trial and the DC election fraud trial. Is it going to matter because it won't come in time for voters to see what happens before they cast their ballots?
No, I believe we're going to see a trial in the spring. I don't think they'll be able to delay it. In terms of what Smith is doing right now, the date is scheduled. Donald Trump is going to stand trial. But let's assume for a minute you're right and nothing happens. There's going to be an ad campaign. The Republicans and the Democrats are going to run ad campaigns. Let me assure you, if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee for president, the Democrats are going to make an indictment. Now, all you have to do is listen, and I use this as an example, to the case made by CNN in their specials on this question. They are an overwhelming indictment of Donald Trump. All they'll have to do is pick up all of that or take a look at the January 6th report. Remember, Liz Cheney is coming out with a book. It's going to roast Donald Trump. And I would remind you, I have not yet read Adam Kinzinger's new book, which I understand came out this week. But let me tell you, if I were a Republican today, I'd say to Donald Trump, thank you. Thank you for your service. Go away. Go away. Because if it comes down to a straight argument, I can make an argument for Donald Trump's policies, even if I don't agree with them. I'm an old debater. I can debate both sides of the issue, and I like to say proudly with equal conviction and without prejudice. That's what you try to do.
Right.
But it's one thing to defend Trump policies, which I find indefensible personally, but one thing to defend them, and another thing to try to defend his conduct. May I suggest to you, if it were anybody else but Donald Trump, and he has been on the stand in this trial, and have you heard the way he's talked about the judge?
Horrible.
Have you heard about the way he's talked to the prosecutor?
You would think the person that holds the future of your family business and all of your, most of your property and whether or not you have to cough up big old fines, that's the person who's going to decide. You'd think you might be a little nicer to them.
He's afraid. He has good reason to be afraid. If this is all presented, he's going to be convicted.
Yeah.
And let me explain so that you understand this. That's a civil matter.
Yeah.
It's not criminal. But it's still an indictment of Donald Trump's whole persona.
Right.
The criminal matters that he's going to be nailed on are real. And people ask me, well, John, how can you say he's going to be nailed? You haven't heard all the evidence. Let me tell you, I've heard enough evidence to understand that there is nothing that saves Donald Trump. And I go back to Mark Meadows, who has flipped. Do people understand the chief of staff to the president of the United States has made a deal? And so he won't go to jail. Well, why would he make a deal? because the man he is going to tell the truth about is Donald Trump. And the same thing applies with Mike Pence. Mike Pence now has no political constraint to prevent him from telling the truth. Now, here's a real question for you, Kim. Will the Trump supporters, hearing the truth from the very individuals who Donald Trump chose to surround himself in the presidency, if they tell the truth and there's a real indictment of Donald Trump and proof positive, will they, the Trump supporters, understand the significance? I have to tell you, I worked for Richard Nixon, as you know, and I want to be very clear about this. When the evidence about Nixon came out, a lot of people didn't want to believe it.
Yeah.
One of Nixon's closest members of Congress was a man named Chuck Wiggins from Southern California. Chuck Wiggins stood in the House and defended Richard Nixon.
How embarrassing.
Until he saw the evidence. Mm-hmm. And when he listened to the smoking gun tape, the Nixon advisors said, well, what do we do? And Chuck Wiggins looked at them and said, what do you mean, what are you going to do? You're going to release the tape, you're going to tell the truth, and I'm not going to lie for you. I'm not going to perjure myself on this. Right. We have to tell the American people the truth and let the chips fall where they may. And he said it with tears in his eyes. That is what I want to hear from the Trump supporters. And by the way, may I separate two things? I don't mind if you support Trump's policies, even if I don't agree with you. That's your right. But to defend Trump's conduct, to defend his subversion of American democracy, to defend what happened on January 6th, unconscionable, unacceptable. And if you think the Republicans lost in Ohio, let me tell you something. I believe, and you and I will test this a year from now, God willing, we'll be talking. I believe that if Donald Trump is on the ballot, the rejection of the American people will be resounding. And I think that is the key to the strength of American democracy.
As they say, from your lips to God's ears, right?
You know what Ohio meant to me? It meant that even people with a partisan point of view who understand the issues can do the right thing. And so that, to me, is the key. May I say, the people in Ohio who wanted their Constitution amended all of a sudden woke up and thought, my God, what would this mean for me? What would it mean for my daughter? What would it mean for my wife?
That's right.
And I think the American people will wake up, those who support Donald Trump, and say, do we really grasp what a Donald Trump presidency would be? I have to say this. He has already said, Kim, that if he is elected president again, he is going to weaponize the Justice Department. He is going to turn it against his enemies.
Allegedly has a big old revenge plan, right? Yeah.
That's right. And do people understand that? Do people understand the significance for all of us as citizens of this great country?
The article I saw in the Washington Post said that there's a plan because of the likelihood of people protesting in the streets if he were to be reelected, that he could kick in the Insurrection Act and there would be martial law and it would be horrible. I mean, the picture painted in the Washington Post is one of fear and chaos.
He must never be president. And when I hear Liz Cheney say that, thank God she is. And she is a conservative, a rock-ribbed conservative. I would never vote for her because I disagree with her on virtually every issue.
Yeah.
But she is speaking the truth.
Do you have to go or do you have time for a couple more questions?
I can stay as long as you want.
Good, because there's a couple more things I want to ask you. And the first of which, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is the debate happening tonight in Florida with the 5 of the Republican presidential candidates. What do you want to hear from them?
The first thing I want to hear from the Republican candidates is their view of Donald Trump and his legal troubles. Second, I want to hear from them how they explain. All of them are so-called pro-life. That is, they oppose a woman's right to choose. I want them to explain how they expect having that position to be able to proceed. I want to know what they think about aid to Israel. And I want to know what they think about taking money away from the Internal Revenue Service, which our previous guest commented on with absolute clarity.
Yeah.
It is unconscionable. I want to know what they think about aid to Ukraine. I want to know whether they believe that Ukraine deserves the aid which we must give them. Israel is in the headlines, and Gaza is in the headlines, and Ukraine, which is equally pressing, has been put off to the side.
Yeah.
I hope that those questions are posed in a tough way. But remember, it is Fox that is going to be hosting this debate. The Republicans chose Fox as their format, and that means there may be some insulation from that. So after the debate is over, I am going to be listening not only to Fox, but to CNN. I want to hear what the CNN commentators have to say. And yes, the commentators on MSNBC. I want to get a full range. But that's what I'm looking for tonight. Oh, and one more thing. Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is emerging for many people as the second choice.
Right.
But may I remind everybody, coming in second doesn't win you the nomination.
I heard her say something outrageous when she was interviewed recently about late-term abortion.
Yeah.
And it was an out-and-out lie. It was complete misinformation. And she said it as if she believed it with a straight face. And that in that moment, I lost all respect. So if abortion is your issue, if you are happy about what happened in Ohio yesterday, then Nikki Haley isn't your candidate. Absolutely not.
And by the way, this myth that Republicans advocate that Democrats advocate abortion until the birth of the child.
Asinine.
It's rubbish.
Right.
And it ought to be called what it is. Pure,
Lies.
unadulterated rubbish. And all of
It's
you
lies.
out there
listening
to the sound of my voice know it's rubbish.
Okay, you brought up Israel and Gaza, and I wasn't going to touch on this today, but a story just came out within the last hour. And so I'd love your take on it before you're free to depart the Mark Thompson show. And that is...
I'm never free to depart the Mark Thompson show.
Well, I don't want to be a John Rothmann hog. I mean, come on. So this report says discussions are taking place about a 3-day pause in the Israel-Hamas war, where they would pause fighting for 3 days. NBC News saying the United States and Israel are discussing this pause to allow for more humanitarian aid into Gaza and the possible release of some hostages still being held by Hamas. The report says Qatar is acting as an intermediary in this brokering of a 3-day pause. I know they don't want to call it a ceasefire because that has connotation. So they're just calling it a pause. Let the people that want to get out, let the aid in, maybe release some hostages. And then in 3 days, we'll see. What do you think about all that?
The key is the release of hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made clear that Israel is prepared to do anything in order to ensure the release of over 200 hostages. I don't know if they'll get all 200 out. But I can tell you that condition, that is to say, the condition under which hostages would be released, would be a legitimate point. Israel has already had humanitarian pauses, has already allowed for that. I don't know whether they'll agree to a 3-day situation or a 1-day situation, but I can tell you Hamas could end all of this by simply releasing the hostages. All of them, 200 plus. And I have to tell you, even while this is going on, Hamas is still firing rockets into Israel. And you know what really bothers me? Do you know that neither the United Nations nor the in the General Assembly or in the Security Council has condemned Hamas for what it did on October 7th? Not a single word of condemnation. So I think the UN better get its act together. I think the blame for this is clearly on Hamas. There was a ceasefire, which Israel was observing until October 7th. And when you think about the 1,400 people who were butchered, and that's the way to put it, butchered, I can assure you no government of Israel, and I hope no person with a conscience would permit anything to happen unless all the hostages are released. And even if all the hostages are released, Hamas cannot be allowed to assume control in Gaza. There's a great question now about whether Israel should reoccupy Gaza.
I was going to ask you that because President Biden says no, Israel should not reoccupy Gaza. But Israel's leadership says, well, wait a minute, we're going to supervise or oversee this region until we see fit. That's going to be a huge thing because people in Gaza already feel like they're under the thumb of the Israelis.
They're under the thumb of Hamas.
But that's how they feel. That's how people feel. You see hundreds of people protesting, even here in America. You know, you see people angry. They feel like their land has been taken. They feel slighted.
Let me assure you of something. This is not new. This was before October the 7th. This has been a constant. Hamas has always called for the destruction of Israel. It still calls for the destruction of Israel. If a Jew should hide, a Jew, not an Israeli, if a Jew should hide behind a rock or a tree, let the rock or the tree cry out, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. No government of Israel is going to deal with Hamas. Hamas is finished.
So now, what do you do though? How do you appease people who feel angry that their land was taken and are never going to get over it? Is there ever
the word that you used? Appease. You don't appease. Israel is a fact. Israel exists. Israel is going to continue to exist. Israel is not going out of business. When the Palestinians and some in the United States chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, let me point out, the river is the Jordan River, the sea is the Mediterranean, and in the middle is Israel. Israel will not disappear, period. Now, I realize that there are those who believe a great injustice was done to the Palestinians.
Right.
I want to remind you that in 1947, well, I'm going to go back in history here for a minute.
No, do that.
On November 29th,
because I want to know the history. What exactly happened when the land was taken?
Hold on. November 29th, 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine, resolution to partition Palestine into two states, one Arab, one Jewish. It was very clear. The Jews accepted the partition. The Arabs rejected it. The Arabs went to war to destroy Israel. Israel won the war. And then we had a period until 1967 when there was a de facto peace. And again, in 1967, the Arabs declared war on Israel, saying they were going to drive them into the sea, destroy them. I can read you the quotes. I can give you the quotes, the dates, the rhetoric.
I believe you're correct.
The point is this. Israel fought a war. It was a defensive war. They won that war. Now, remember, when you talk about Gaza, do you know who controlled Gaza before between 1948 and 1967? Egypt. Egypt controlled it. And do you know that Israel actually conquered Gaza in 1956 in part of the 1956 Suez Campaign? And Israel withdrew from Gaza with a guarantee that they would never be attacked from Gaza. And then in 1967, it happened again. And then in 2005 and 6, Arik Sharon, the prime minister of Israel, withdrew from Gaza unilaterally. He gave up the settlements. He pulled every settlement out, every settler out. Absolutely. And he said to the Palestinians, this can be a Riviera. This can be a great place. And I've spent a lot of time in Gaza, Kim. I can tell you it could have been. And the Palestinians were given a chance. The Palestinian Authority was given a chance, and they failed. Hamas took over, and now Israel is putting up with attacks from Gaza. And the Israelis are simply saying, okay, enough is enough. You want a peace agreement. Let Hamas be rejected. Let the Palestinians say once and for all, we accept Israel's right to exist, and let's come to terms. That is the only way that there will be a solution. Otherwise, you and I will continue to have this discussion, and the world will continue to confront for years.
Because I don't think they want that. I think they just want their land back.
No.
Wait. I have a question. Let me ask. Let me make a comparison.
They want their land back.
They do.
You understand what that means? That means the destruction of Israel. I listened the other day to a Palestinian representative talk about 75 years of occupation. Use your computer. 75 or your mind. 75 years is 1948. That's how long ago. They're not talking about an occupation of Gaza. They're talking about the fact, as you yourself said, Kim, that Israel took their land.
Yeah.
Well, let me be clear about this. Israel is a nation that is a member of the United Nations. It is recognized by the world as an existing nation. And I'm going to give a word to you. It is called politicide. Politicide means the destruction of an existing nation. There is only one nation in the world that today is subject to the possibility of politicide, and that's Israel. Well, I can tell you clearly, Israel is not going to allow that to happen.
The question I have is, I love Israel, and I love America, but in America, and I bring this up because I've read recent things about making this comparison, right? America militarily overpowered Native Americans and took their land. We duped Hawaii out of their land. There have been multiple instances where we stole. We took the land. We fought wars. We claimed land. And, you know, we're here now. It's America. We're not giving the land back, right? But when you look morally at what happened, you think to yourself, we really shouldn't have done that to the Native Americans. Now, am I willing to give my house and the property I own up for that? No, but I'm sad that it happened the way it did, and I'm sad that the whole colonizer thing happened and that we steamrolled over people and stole from them. Could you make the comparison, as I have seen, that Israel also has stolen land, and so, like the Native Americans and like the Hawaiians who actually want their land back, that it's not unreasonable for the people that live in what was Palestine to want it back? And I'm not asking to inflame. I legitimately want to know what you think.
The answer is the indigenous people in that part of the world are the Jews. That was their homeland. They were expelled from their homeland. They went into exile, settled all over the world, and found themselves being subject to vicious persecution in place after place. The world decided, and the Jewish people demanded, that they have a homeland. And the world voted in the General Assembly of the United Nations to create an independent Jewish state, which we now know as Israel. It is true that there was injustice done to some, but the simple truth is injustice was done to Jews. Are you familiar with the fact that Jews were expelled from Arab countries? That over 750,000 Jews were expelled from Arab countries? Where did they go, Kim? You know where they went? To Israel. I can't make historical injustice go away. I don't believe the creation of Israel was a historic injustice, but I believe what is an injustice is that the Arab world, many of them embraced peace with Israel, Egypt, Jordan, the Abraham Accords, and Israel has been able to live with mortal enemies as at least friends of a cold sense, but friends. We need that from the Palestinians. Where is the Palestinian Authority, for heaven's sake? Israel signed an Oslo Accord. Arafat, Rabin, and Peres signed an accord. And who rejected that accord? Hamas. The world rejoiced when they thought there might be peace. And today, the Palestinian Authority, completely impotent. Abbas won't hold an election on the West Bank because he knows Hamas would win. Well, let me tell you, Kim, Israel at its narrowest prior to 1967 was 9 miles wide. I know people who jog 9 miles every day. I am not one of them. But I can assure you, if that state existed and Hamas took over, Israel would be destroyed. And may I ask another question? Where is the outcry over 1,400 Jews being slaughtered because they were Jews? Where was the voice of the United Nations? Where is the voice of the world? Do we have such short memories? And please, those people were not attacked for any other reason but that they were Jews. Men, women, children. No, Israel is going to be very tough on this. The Palestinians deserve justice, but not at the expense of Israel's right to exist.
Well, I
Period.
think we've exhausted the topic, and I thank you for, always being the professor in the house and helping us learn about your thoughts about all of this. So thank you for that, and
Yeah, can
thanks
I
for
one
your.
more thing before we go? I know you've got
Please
to end it.
bring
You've
it
got other
on.
things to do.
Yeah.
No, it's what's happening in this country. And I would be remiss if I did not say this. Jews in the United States are terrified by what
Yeah.
they are witnessing on college and university campuses, what
Are
they
they
are
really?
witnessing in communities.
Are they really going out and buying guns? Because I haven't done the
No,
story, but I keep reading this inflammatory story about, oh, the Jewish people are at the gun stores buying the guns because they're so afraid, and that doesn't seem right.
that is not necessarily true.
Yeah.
And I want to make that clear. But do you understand the underlying question that you've asked? Are Jews legitimately afraid?
Yeah.
I don't own a gun. I don't want to own a gun. I have lived in this country my whole life. I've worked on the staff of the President of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in politics and in community affairs for years. Ask me whether I'm afraid. I am.
Yeah.
You're darn right I'm afraid, because Jews in the United States are being told to take off their yarmulkes, the little head coverings. They're being told to put their stars of David, which they wear around their necks, away. Every synagogue and every Jewish community center and every Jewish communal building in this country now has armed guards. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
And that is coming.
In America.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
crazy.
I understand the battle in the Middle East. I've been talking about the Middle East, consulting on the Middle East. I'm theoretically, as you know from the days at KGO, a Middle East expert.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the passions. I can present the Palestinian case better than they can, to be very honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue here is the security of Jews. Look at what is happening, please, in Europe. May I tell you one thing? I know we've got to end, but I want to tell you this.
Yeah.
After Kristallnacht in 1938 and the defeat of Hitler in 1945, the Jews in Vienna created a memorial, a crypt, that included Torah scrolls, prayer books, Jewish ritual items, to be put on display so people could see what had happened. Last week, in an act so dastardly I can hardly talk about it, that crypt containing those sacred objects was burned to the ground. Where is the outrage of the world?
I didn't hear about it. I didn't know.
Google it. Google it
Yeah.
now. Let people know.
Yeah.
If you wonder why your Jewish friends are afraid, Kim, one last thing.
Yeah.
The rabbi at my synagogue posed a question. The question was, if this were a period in which you had to go to your non-Jewish neighbor for protection, do you think your non-Jewish neighbor would protect you? Who would you go to? The fact that that kind of question is asked in the United States of America, in San Francisco, California.
That's a shocker, because I don't necessarily, I mean, and I know I'm putting my own personal spin on it, but that is not true. I would think that the majority of Americans, if they legitimately felt that they had neighbors of any religion that were in trouble, would open a door and say, come in and be here.
That's what my father thought in Germany, Kim.
Yeah, well, we've seen what happened in Germany,
right?
That's
what my father
We learned
believed.
the lessons of the past. We're smarter than that now, are we not?
No, we have not learned the lessons of the past. That's the whole point. My father was a professor of medicine at Halle-Wittenberg University. He was one of 43 who was expelled because he was a Jew. You know what shattered my father? The fact that not a single one of his professional colleagues or friends, not one, stood up. Why? Because they were afraid of what would happen to them. And this was in 1933. This is before there were concentration camps. This is before the horror emerged of the Holocaust. And I'm going to suggest to you that if you talk to Jews in this country and you ask them, and by the way, this applies to Muslims too. I remember I was on KGO when September 11th took place. I was the talk show host sitting in for Gene Burns that night. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that there was the anti-Muslim sentiment was appalling. And we needed, and that's one good thing George W. Bush did as president. He immediately reached out to the Muslim community and said, you are Americans. We are not, you don't have to be afraid. The Jews expect, and I think are entitled to the same kind of response that we gave to Muslims after September 11th. But here's the question, Kim. How does this virus of Jew hatred infect us in this country in this way?
All I can think is that it must be under the surface. Either one, it's being overstated and all of the stories are, you see individual stories in communities and you think it's more widespread than it is, or it is widespread and that it was just under the surface waiting to leach out.
Every community of Jews. I went this last weekend to give a talk in Modesto at the State Theater. They showed the film Golda, and the mayor was there. There were about 300 people in attendance, half Jews, half non-Jews. The police department was there.
Yeah.
Because a film was being screened. And somebody came up and said, we're surprised there isn't a counter demonstration. A counter demonstration to what? Do you understand? And
But people you have to understand, though, that people are angry. They see what happened in Israel October 7th, and they're angry about that. But then the seeming indiscriminate bombing is getting people
not indiscriminate bombing.
That's how some people feel. Yeah.
The fact that people say it's indiscriminate bombing, all I can tell you is Hamas took billions of dollars in supplies that were supposed to go to their people. And what did they do? They built underground tunnels. They secured rockets. They fired off missiles. They are firing off missiles today. It is not indiscriminate. Israel gave, and I want people to understand this, Israel gave 72 hours warning for people to get out of the way. We didn't do that in Iraq, for God's sake.
No, we sure didn't.
In Afghanistan. Israel
I think it feels, when you see the pictures of the innocent people that are affected, it feels wrong.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it may feel wrong, but then when we bombed Dresden and when we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
that was wrong.
Wrong as well.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, in the middle of the night on KGO every August, I would ask the question about dropping the bomb, and I learned a very valuable generational lesson. Older people who had lived during World War II were grateful. Mm-hmm. They said, thank God Truman dropped the bomb. Younger people asked a different kind of question. Mm-hmm. Why did we have to drop the bomb? Couldn't we have done something else? And I have to tell you that when the board was quiet in the middle of the night, not very often when I was on the air, but when it happened, and I posed that kind of question, the generational divide is what interested me. I have very good friends in Israel, Kim, who are very far to the left, who are in favor of virtually anything to bring peace, who are now convinced you cannot make peace with an enemy that slaughters 1,400 people indiscriminately. There's no peace with somebody like that. So the Palestinians have an obligation now.
Yeah.
They have to get their act together. Where's the Palestinian Authority? Have you heard them come out and condemn Hamas? No, of course not. No. Where's the Palestinian Authority to say we are willing to assert anything that's positive?
Yeah.
They're afraid. And so it's not that I'm not anti-Palestinian. I've been an advocate of a two-state solution for years. Yeah. I defended the Oslo process when a lot of people in the Jewish community were skeptical. I have reached out over the years. But what do you do when you run into this kind of situation and there is no moral equivalency?
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Kim, it's a straight question. If you lived in Israel and you knew the rockets were flying from Gaza, what would you do? Would you simply allow the rocket and the perpetrators to
maybe you'll call me maybe you'll call me a turncoat, or maybe you'll call me someone who's doesn't have a healthy dose of nationalism. I would have been out of there. I don't want to have my family in a place that's not safe. I don't want to have my children.
Did people after September 11th, did people out of New York? If we had been attacked here in San Francisco, and you may not remember this, but there was an alert about the Golden Gate Bridge, which I can see from my bedroom window. Would I move? Absolutely not. No, then you give into terror. You cannot surrender to terror. And it's a terrible price that people pay. But if you let terror win, everyone loses. And you lose because you lose your personal freedom.
I put the safety of my children over that. And if there's bombs falling, if I'm living somewhere that's constantly under threat, I don't feel safe. I never feel safe, and I gotta go.
Then all I can say to you is you would have to move. You couldn't live in Israel.
Yeah.
And you couldn't live, there are many countries you couldn't live in. But then again, there are some who would argue you couldn't live in certain parts of San Francisco or certain parts of Oakland. I have to tell you very bluntly, I don't live in fear. I've never been able to live in fear. I never want to live in fear. I want to be able to hold my head up proudly. When I was on KGO, I received death threats because I was a Jew. I wasn't the only one. Ron Owens received them too. And once the Jay Weekly here in Northern California ran a cover story on Ron Owens, on Michael Krasny, who was then with KQED, and myself, and how do you handle this kind of thing? Does it make you fearful? I never put my head down. I never apologized for my views, and I would not be intimidated. I won't live a life of intimidation, and I've taught my children the same thing. Stand up for who you are. Don't be ashamed. And it doesn't mean that your government always does the right thing. Think of all the times the United States of America has done the wrong thing. What do? We battle harder for the United States. The case of abortion or the right of a woman to choose.
Yeah.
The fact that the Supreme Court did what it did doesn't mean that we have to sit back and take it. We have to struggle back politically. The difference in this moment has to do with the security and safety of Jews. I am telling you, I'm telling all the listeners, Jews, your friends, your neighbors are afraid because of what they are seeing.
It makes me wish, and I know I have to let you go.
No, you
because
don't.
I've now sucked about 45 minutes out of you. But I feel like, and you once asked me this question, and I remember the look on your face was one of shock. You said, "What are you?" As in, what religion are you? And I said, "I'm nothing." And you're like, "No. What were your parents?" And I said, "Nothing." And you're like, no, what were they? They had to come from something. They had to have been some religion. So I'm thinking back, and I think my grandparents might have been some sect of Episcopalian, something, somewhere. But from my parents' generation and my generation, religion doesn't play into it. We don't go to church. We're a moral family, but we're not a religious family. And so,
do you celebrate Christmas?
Interestingly, because it's a tradition, but we don't celebrate the religious aspect of it.
Okay, so you don't sing a Christmas carol.
We sing a Christmas carol, but we don't seriously believe in the religious part of it all. Okay. It's tradition. It's more of like, it's the tree gathering with family and giving presents and having a nice meal together. It's not Jesus's birthday. That to us, that's not what it is.
Most Jews that I know are not Jews by religion. That is to say, their identification is not by going to synagogue or by observing religious holidays. I can tell you my father, as a Jew in Germany, served in the German army. My grandfather was the Kaiser's doctor. My father was uncircumcised because my grandfather didn't want him to look different from other Germans when he went into the army.
That might be TMI.
That did not save my father or his family.
Yeah.
It had not to do with religion. Yeah. Jews are more than a religion. Jews are a civilization.
So what you're saying is my thought process that religion causes most of the ills in the world wouldn't make a difference when it comes to people of Jewish background.
Well, you may say that, but I can tell you, read the Hamas covenant. And all you have to do is read it. It's online. Yeah. And it'll tell you that Jews are out to conquer the world. Do you know that Hamas has in its covenant the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, a notorious anti-Semitic forgery which accused the Jews of trying to take over the world? Did you know that if you read the Hamas covenant, Jews started World War I, World War II? Did you know that? No. That Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world? They're not talking about Jews as a religion. They are talking about Jews. And it's hard for us to understand in this country where
Yeah.
religion plays a role, but where we are a secular society. Why do you think some of these evangelical Christians, including the Speaker of the House of Representatives, want to call us a Christian nation? And why do you think we fight that so vigorously? Because we are a nation made up of many different faiths.
Brian writes, I am afraid, I fear the emotional and physical cost of those who do not know the facts of the Middle East and voice their opinion against the Jews. You need to know the history, he says.
Yeah. But do you understand? I'm going to say something I used to say on the radio all the time. Don't confuse people with the facts. And I must tell you, sadly, that at this moment, and heaven only knows what's happening while we are in the process of this discussion, that what is happening in the Middle East, best example, and then I know we have to stop. Please look at the General Assembly or the Security Council of the United Nations. You will search in vain for any statement condemning what happened on October 7th. How is it possible that the nations of the world who subscribed to the Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations, which I hasten to point out was crafted by Eleanor Roosevelt after the Holocaust, as the UN was being created, how do you account for the statements being made against Jews today? And please understand, that is why there is fear. You know, I did a commentary on my podcast. Franklin Roosevelt once said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I wish that were the case. But as a Jew living, I would remind you now, in the 21st century, there's a lot more to fear. And all of your Jewish friends and neighbors all feel that fear. And that's what has to be taken into account.
I have to thank you for answering my questions without anger or prejudice, because I know that maybe they rubbed you the wrong way, but I really am trying to understand. So thank you for that.
Can I give you one more example? I know we've got to end, but I just want to tell you, there was a great Jewish philosopher who I had the pleasure of meeting on a number of occasions named Abraham Joshua Heschel. And on the eve of the Six-Day War, when the Arab world was calling for Israel's destruction, a well-meaning Christian friend came to Dr. Heschel and asked him, why are you so concerned? And Heschel, who was a very gentle man, responded calmly, gently, imagine there is only one copy of the Bible left in the world, and you see it about to be hurled into the flames. When Jews see what is happening, we see our history, our people, our lives, just as happened in Gaza, thrown into the flames. And the world cannot allow that. That's why the term never again resonates so fully in the Jewish community.
John Rothmann, thank you for hanging out with us on the Mark Thompson Show. I appreciate
Kim
you staying
McAllister,
longer.
always my pleasure.
I love you. Big heart. Love you. Bye.
Bye.
See you next Wednesday. Bye. John Rothmann, everybody. We really could honestly talk about this all day. You know, I want to see it from both perspectives. I want to know, I see the questions coming from people I know that are of Palestinian descent or supporting Palestinians. I want those questions answered. And so John Rothmann is the perfect person for me to bounce things off of. So I get both perspectives, and I hope that you enjoyed the conversation as well. Okay, so a couple other things. Hi, Albert. Do you want to do news? What do you want to do next? Because I know we have some other things.
Let me play a sweeper. I'll play a longer sweeper so you can take a break. You've been talking for a long time, and then
you're so nice to me.
Did you want to do a news? That's up to you, because we have a couple segments we could get to as well.
Yeah, let's do some segments. I know you put in some work on those, so let's go ahead and do it.
Okay, so I'll play a longer sweeper. We'll take a short break. I'll maybe hit another rejoin with a video, and then we'll get back into the show.
Perfecto mundo. We'll be back in a minute.
And folks, don't forget to
with your iron rod.
The like button, please.
Smash it with your iron rod and subscribe if you haven't. And the MarkThompsonShow.com is where the Patreon and the PayPal link is located. Yes.
The Mark Thompson Show. The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Feels great, baby.
Let me kick down the door and talk to my cheap sons and daughters. No context will suffice to explain the hurt and anguish caused by my words. I apologize to all who have been hurt.
I stand corrected. I misspoke. My words upset so many people.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
God bless America. The end.
There's never been anything like this.
Do I hit it long? Is Trump strong? Huh?
Who is having that conversation?
It's fantastic.
That's not fake. That's real.
The science is ridiculous.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir. If you get it in order, you get extra points.
Listen to me. I don't want to hear you.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
This is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
There is no defense for my conduct. It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
Don't ever use that word.
You get nothing.
What's a guilty pleasure to that?
Seriously, what the
What could this be? Let's look. I'm so excited. It's the Mark Thompson Show.
Is CinemaScope.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yes, it is the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Kim McAllister in for Mark Thompson, and Mark will be back tomorrow. Right now, he's in the sky, flying through the air back to California, and so we'll get him back on the Mark Thompson Show tomorrow. Huge thank you to Gail Guthrie, who slapped down a $10 super sticker.
Thank you
Gail,
so
your
much.
kindness, yes, thank you so much. You're so appreciated. Albert and I really appreciate it, and it makes us look good to Mark when he comes back. It's like, oh yeah, people really liked what you were doing. Okay. Beth Farmer for $10. At least gold and silver exist.
Thank you.
And can be used for industry. Thank you as well. That was related to the discussion that we had with Michael Hiltzik. So thank you, Beth Farmer, for the $10 super sticker and for your comment as well. Luis, $4.99. There's nowhere we'd rather be than with John Rothmann today.
Thank you so much.
You got a John Rothmann super dose. So I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you, Luis. Much appreciated. Thank you for all the ways you guys help support the show. You are appreciated. And thank you for hanging with me, even though Mark is not here. If you do want to support the show, themarkthompsonshow.com is our website. That is where you will find all the click-throughs to Patreon, to PayPal, and other ways you support the show. And again, thank you for the super stickers as well. Okay, let's do some news of the bazaar.
Okay, so I don't have that element. I think Mark has it.
Okay.
But we can. Maybe I'll just hit one of these sweepers. I know Mark would love that.
We'll do it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
That's right. This is kind of an update on a story that we had mentioned on the Mark Thompson Show. Remember the tenant from hell in the Airbnb in Los Angeles? This lady that checked in and never checked out and would refuse to leave? I'm telling you, she did it in Oakland too. And then she did it in this house in Los Angeles. Elizabeth Hirshorn is her name. She's known as the tenant from hell. She refused to pay rent at a luxury Airbnb rental in Los Angeles. And finally, after 570 days, she's moved out. Whew, but that took a lot.
It's a wild idea, but it just might work.
Not only am I not going to leave, but I'm not going to pay rent. It's every landlord's or Airbnb host's nightmare, right? The Los Angeles Police Department had to escort Elizabeth off the property on November 3rd. The LA Times says the owner of the home where that Airbnb is located told the paper he had such a peaceful weekend when she left. Whew. She moved into the guest house in Brentwood, an affluent neighborhood in Los Angeles, like we didn't know, in September of 2021 for what was supposed to be a 6-month Airbnb stay. But the short-term lease was supposed to end in March of 2022. The homeowner agreed to give her a couple extra weeks, but once the lease agreement was taken off Airbnb, Hirshhorn said the unit was directly under the rent control ordinance and she refused to pay rent. And since the guest house didn't have an occupancy license and also failed to have an illegal shower, this meant the homeowner would have to evict her to remove her from the property. Again, Ms. Hirshhorn did this again, allegedly, in Oakland just before she moved to Los Angeles. So maybe this is her way of getting free rent for a year or 2 years before she has to finally move on to the next place.
I mean, she could just hide in the property, I feel like, These properties look huge. This is Brentwood neighborhood over here. I'm not sure where she's staying in Oakland, but...
Right.
I mean,
well, that was before the LA thing.
Yeah.
The Oakland property manager filed a lawsuit against her saying, or rather, the Hirshhorn moved into the Oakland property and then filed a suit the next year alleging that the homeowner sprayed a hazardous substance through the house. The tenant claimed the Hirshhorn stopped paying rent and that the homeowner filed to have her evicted. They settled that privately. But it looks like this woman allegedly will come up with a scam or a reason as to why she needs to stay. What a nightmare, man. Next news of the bizarre story has to do with a surprising toilet paper hack. Do you put your toilet paper in the fridge? Why would you? Interesting.
Actually, I have a video. Just give me a moment. I'm trying to pull
bring it up because there's some TikTok people who swear by putting toilet paper in the refrigerator. I had heard the freezer, but I guess the refrigerator. I guess it can soak up odors. That's why you would put it in the. But then, do you want to use stinky toilet paper? Let's take a look.
But have you ever thought that you can do other things with toilet paper? In this video, I'm going to show you 6 incredible tricks with toilet paper and how you can take your toilet paper to the next level. With trick number 1, you can save a lot of nerves, but also a good amount of money. Before you hang up the toilet paper roll, you should press it hard so that the hole in the roll is no longer round, but rather oval. If it's round, you automatically unroll too much toilet paper, which you then use instead of rolling it up again. If you have flattened the roll beforehand,
there's never been anything like this.
Because you have to use a little more force to turn the toilet paper. This way you don't waste as much and automatically use less. Trick number 2 is a real secret trick from the hotel industry. Here, toilet paper rolls are put in the fridge, and you can also use this at home. All you have to do is take a roll of toilet paper and put it in your fridge.
What?
Really?
Because toilet paper absorbs unpleasant odors. In this way, you ensure that your fridge no longer smells unpleasant. Every 2 to 3 weeks, you should replace the roll with a new one.
Well, you don't use that roll afterward. It's all smelly and absorbed all your fridge odors, right?
I mean, I'd hope, but that's I don't know if that's a real thing. We might have to just play test this one, Kim.
I don't know. I think that's wasteful. You waste your toilet paper. During the pandemic, didn't we know that we were supposed to hoard toilet paper?
Yeah, that was maybe people have too much toilet paper because of all the hoarding they were doing. Maybe you try doing that.
Don't you just put a thing of baking soda in the fridge? Isn't that what that's for?
Yeah, I don't know why it's so hard to do that, but
I don't know either. All right, let's get to a stories from the sky.
We have clearance, Clarence.
Roger, Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Enough is enough! I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane! Everybody strap in!
stories from the sky on the Mark Thompson show. And yesterday, something happened in Southern California. I hate to see these historic structures go up in flames, but that is what happened yesterday morning at the Tustin Airbase in Southern California. They had their, when I think of it, I think of Moffett Airfield, you know, the old blimp hangar at Moffett, that historic structure there. Well, this 17-story hangar, also historic, at the former Tustin Air Base in Southern California, which had been built to house blimps in World War II, burnt to the ground. And the firefighters responding there said they have to abandon the effort to fight it. They have to let it collapse in on itself. It sent plumes of smoke into the air. Here's the quote: "Due to the dynamic nature of the fire and the imminent danger of collapse, we have determined the most operationally sound method is to allow the structure to collapse, at which point ground crews can move in closer and then work to put out the fire." So it's ruined. It's gone. No one was hurt. They don't know what started this fire, but this historic old blimp hangar that was built in 1942 and one of two giant hangars at the former Tustin Air Base is gone. It once held 6 of the 12 military blimps at the base used to patrol the Pacific for Japanese submarines. They even had a helium plant out there. There were 100 military choppers during the Vietnam War. So this place is full of history. I'm sorry to see that old hangar go. You know, once those things are gone, it's the end of an age of our history is gone with it. The next story has to do with a loaded gun found in an airline employee's bag at a security checkpoint. Now, you would think an airline employee would be up on all the rules, would be the one who's not messing it up, right? No. This happened at MSP, the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, where the TSA stopped an airline employee from trying to bring a loaded handgun through security. Please. TSA officials saying in a press release that an officer screening an employee's bag November 2nd saw a handgun on the X-ray, alerted the airport police. An airport official didn't specifically identify the employee's role, but did say they are a flight-based worker with SkyWest Airlines.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
The gun was loaded at the time of the screening. It was the 49th firearm stopped at the airport, the MSP airport, so far this year.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Like, the whole excuse of, I just didn't realize it was in my bag, is kind of getting old. And this is loaded. How do you not know you have a loaded weapon on you? Maybe you were trying to test out the security systems, make sure you were safe. Or, I don't know, maybe you were meant to do people harm, but security got you. So there you go. That's good.
And an airline employee, you got to know better.
I know. Come on. Okay. American Airlines is offering $250,000 in bonuses to poach FedEx and UPS pilots. I guess there's not enough pilots to go around. So they want those pilots. Yes, $250,000 in bonuses. They are on a hiring spree at American Airlines, and they're offering these big old honking bonuses for FedEx and UPS pilots to jump from piloting cargo carriers to working as captains on passenger airplanes. PSA Airlines, a regional carrier owned by American, is dangling these $250,000 bonuses for UPS and FedEx pilots, who they hope can help fill a gap in service to smaller U.S. cities, which has apparently, the market for that has really widened over the last year, as smaller airports have been forced to cancel flights because of a lack of pilots. They are desperate enough for pilots with enough experience to join that, they would rather pay $250,000 than keep these planes grounded. So
is that a similar price tag for you, Kim, to leave the Mark Thompson show? If somebody is it in the ballpark?
It depends on what kind of show it was. Would it be like a Hannity show that I'd have to go to?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, so it would depend on what kind of the content type of thing.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, there could technically be enough money to lure me away, but it would have to be the right lure. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're safe. It's okay. Speaking of money, though, Do you hear about this? American Airlines flight attendants have been awarded more than $1 million collectively because of uniforms they had to wear that made them sick. I guess that when the uniforms come, they have some chemicals in them, and the flight attendants that were affected, they had headaches and nausea and rashes, and in some cases they felt dizzy, and so they sued. They were awarded more than $1 million by a California jury. The verdict against Twin Hill came out of Alameda County Superior Court. Tailored Brands, which is Twin Hill's former parent company, they also own the Men's Warehouse. They were dismissed as defendants based on the lack of evidence of any joint venture or vicarious liability during the trial. But the lawsuit said the flight attendants said uniforms had traces of formaldehyde and toluene and other toxic chemicals that were linked to health problems.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess resins like formaldehyde are often used in fabrics to keep the clothes wrinkle-free and make them last longer, but in some cases it can have deleterious effects on people. So
I mean, there's photos in this article that you're reading from, and I just don't want to. I just don't want to show them. It's
let's not look
pretty.
at the rashes. No.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this one. I don't know if this is a news of the bizarre.
It's a little bit of both, I feel like.
Is it stories from the sky as well? I mean, it's kind of like everything wrapped into one. This story is about a kind fellow named Boozy Badass. Oh, sorry, Badass with Z's at the end. Who is, yeah, you're welcome. He's asked for help locating the ankle monitor that he claims slipped off. And now he's offering a $5,000 reward for said ankle monitor. He said he needs help. It's his ankle monitor. He put on X. There's a reward for anyone who can help locate the ankle monitor or charger because it slipped off at some point during his journey home from Atlanta to Los Angeles International Airport. Boozy Badass says, I was on Delta Flight 0501 Seat 8C coming from Atlanta to LA, and my ankle monitor charger slipped off my leg, and this is how he wrote it. And it's either Atlanta Airport or LAX, he wrote in a tweet. Can you please bring it back to me? $5K cash reward. I'm not trying to get in trouble, shaking my head. Send your contact and in pics of the charger to my email. And then he lists his email, $5,000.
You know, they do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
You know, we often have the problem when we're, flying across the country and our ankle monitor slips off.
Yeah, don't you hate when that happens, Kim? It's just the thing that has to stay on your ankle comes off.
Are you supposed to be flying across the country when you have an ankle monitor on? Because I thought when you have an ankle monitor, you were supposed to stay in like a certain area, like a range of a place, right? Like you're not allowed to leave this region,
this county,
right?
Or like this state. I don't know.
I don't think you're supposed to be hopping a plane and like going from Atlanta to California. I don't know. So Boozy's problem is that he was arrested by federal agents after they spotted him with a firearm tucked into his waistband during an Instagram live stream. Apparently that's no bueno. He was arrested outside of a courthouse in San Diego on being a felon, possession of a weapon by a felon. So that's what he's charged with. After he spent a week behind bars, he was released on bond, ordered to wear this ankle monitor. And so that's why he has the ankle monitor on, and he needs it back. So if you could help Boozy Badass find his ankle monitor, the world would be a much better place.
Okay, well, I'm just rereading this. So I think his ankle monitor is intact.
Yeah, is it the charger?
It's just the charger. Yeah, they clickbaited us, Kim, but that's fine.
Is that what happened? Okay.
Yeah, so I think it did remain on his ankle, but I'm not sure the rules of how far he could go with that ankle monitor. So.
I think that's against the rules.Maybe he had court permission. Who knows? Maybe
and I don't know what happens if it dies. If the battery dies on the ankle monitor, do they think he's a free man? He's on the way.
I mean, you have to sign that you're, willing to meet all the obligations, and that's probably to keep it charged and keep it on and keep it ready.
Yeah, we maybe have to follow up on this, maybe.
The Boozy Badass Patrol. We'll get right on that. Okay, this has been the Mark Thompson Show. I'm so grateful that you hung out with me for this episode today. Super, super big thanks to Vilma, who popped in a $2 super sticker. Vilma, you're awesome and I love you. Pinky, $1 a day, Pinky, you are also loved. And Doug, you are also loved with your $5 super sticker. You guys are awesome. Tomorrow, Mark Thompson will be back. Yay! Confetti, woo! We're excited to welcome him in. We have our Thursday cavalcade of guests, including David Katz. Always a great conversation with him. You guys have been wonderful. Thank you so much for being here on the Mark Thompson Show. I've watched everything you had to say in the chat, and thank you so much for participating in all of that. Next up, we have the Afterparty Live, which is kind of like one big long news of the bizarre. So we'll get to that, the Afterparty Live, here on YouTube. I'll try to put, during the credits, the link into the show. Thank you guys again, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your afternoon, Albert.
I'm
you too, Kim. I'm glad to be back. And Mark will be back. And I think tomorrow we have David Katz. David Katz Day tomorrow.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for being here. Bye, Albert.